Hey guys, Chris Murphy here. I'm here with Dev Sandberg. Hey Dev.
Hey, Chris. Nice to see you, man.
Yeah, you can see you again, Dev. So I've not seen Dev in a while in person because the last few months he's been in Kiev. He's now in Mexico City. So I want to interview Dev today because a few months ago he just told me that he was just going to go to Kiev for a few months. And like myself and many other people I know, sometimes dream of going away, traveling, or just living in a different environment. But Dev, he had this practice and things in Brighton. He had a place to stay. He was in a relationship, and then sort of just put all of that on not necessarily hold, or just wanted a break and just to see where life was going to take him. So Dev, I guess just start off with what drove you to go into Kiev for 3 months, and why Kiev, and also how you just had the courage to just go for it, and see where you end up.
Well, I mean, for a few years, I was maybe back in 2016 or something, 17. I was hearing a lot about people, this digital nomad idea. Probably been around longer than that, but people who could work on their laptop and just travel around. And at the time, I'd been living for a long time in a community, so totally not traveling around, just living in one little space in the community. And I kind of thought, wow, that's pretty cool. And I was also interested for a while around that time in cryptocurrency and all that kind of thing. And that's a bit tied into this, but the idea that you could just kind of carry a few things with you, like a snail, in your big bag, and just travel off and live in different places, that the infrastructure was kind of now available with things like Airbnb and Wi-Fi and that kind of stuff intrigued me. So at the time, I couldn't really do it, but it sort of sat in my brain like, wow, I'd like to do that. I'd like to just travel around and see what life is like. Because I'd done a lot of traveling in my 20s and 30s, but mostly just in the winter and not working and traveling. I mean, that was like the 80s and 90s and stuff. So there wasn't so much technology around in those days. But, and then I'd been living communally and getting into the whole therapy scene and then becoming a therapist, blah, 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 for like 20 years. And then when I moved out of that scene and I was back in Brighton, like in 2019, living in a flat now with a girlfriend. And then the COVID came, the lockdowns and that. And in that time, I kind of built up quite a good online thing as a therapist. Some one-to-one sessions online, which is it's a bit funny, but it's doable with the kind of body-based stuff I teach. But also people have been asking me for courses on bioenergetics and Reichian work. So I started to create online content for those. And I started that just before the lockdown. And then they became quite successful to a point where I was earning enough money to live, off just for courses. And then at the same time, me and my girlfriend were in lockdown for ages. And at some point when it started to come to a bit of an end in last summer, we were asking ourselves, like, where are we going? What do we want to do? And we wanted to do different stuff, really. And so over the course of months, we kind of split up, and she went back to Italy and then came back to the UK. And I just went off to Kiev in August. And I thought I'll just experiment with living like digital nomad style and see if it's, how do I get on? What are the challenges that come, because I do seem to be able to earn enough money, but what are the other challenges about just rocking up in some town where you don't know anybody and stuff like that. So there's been a lot of learnings, but I'm enjoying it so far. And I was in Kiev for about 3 months, and then I was back in the UK. I had a workshop to co-lead and just see my dad and my sister and her kids and stuff, and hang out in Brighton, meet some friends. And then now I'm in Mexico, basically. I just arrived in Mexico City. So, I'm about 4 months into my little experiment, and it's going okay so far.
Great stuff, Dev. So how was it? How were you when you first got to Kiev then? And how did you find it adjusting to life and getting into a routine? I remember you saying stuff like, just getting to the gym and getting your sort of accommodation sorted, and what sort of the
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I stayed in an Airbnb. It wasn't that great the first place I stayed in. It's hard with the pictures to know how good the Airbnbs are. It was okay. It was the end of summer in Kiev, the end of August, and then I was kind of rushing around to get myself a travel card, get a local SIM card, find a gym and get a gym membership because I was kind of keen on the gym, and keep my energy moving. And then the challenge is then to sort of meet people. I had one vague friend, a half American guy that I know a bit from a few years ago in Budapest, but we weren't super close or something like that. So I met up with him, but then it was clear, that I needed to meet other people, that I couldn't speak Russian or Ukrainian, and most of them couldn't speak English. So I had to find English speaking people. So, again, it's just like, it was just for me, okay, go online, look for any kind of clubs or groups that are happening where people are speaking English and there is stuff going on, and then just kind of, go along, rock up and meet people and just, some people you vibe with, some people you don't. But at some point I made enough friends that kind of when I finished work for the day, if I wanted to go out and meet someone and go for a meal or hang out and have a beer, there's someone around that can speak my language. So, that was a challenge, but it's doable. It's doable. It's not so, people make excuses. As long as you're accurate with your needs, and you go for it, and you're just honest with yourself, I think you can do these things. And there's enough people traveling and doing things, and whether they're digital nomad or whether they're just 25-year-old backpackers, or whether they're kind of expats working in a different country for the company and stuff like that. There are people out there, and they need to meet. So there are groups and things that you can do. There's also local people in a country who want to learn English or want to practice English, conversation clubs and stuff. There's all sorts of things you can do to meet people. It's not so hard.
Yeah, definitely. So what were some of your fears though, like of going, when you got over there, and worst case scenarios you were perhaps thinking, and also just generally, I mean, obviously, Dev, you've worked as a therapist, you've worked with myself and all these other sort of people in my group and stuff. I mean, what do you generally think a lot of the fears of those people are as well, and why they won't go traveling? Or
well, people are afraid to take, if it's other people are afraid to take risks, and anyone who's got a component of dissociation in their psyche, which is very common for Westerners, and is in my psyche as well, will tend to have a lot of ideas, but then they will always notice, well, if they're honest, they will notice that something tends to come in the way whenever they try and manifest their ideas, and it's because they're dissociated, and there's a background level of fear. For me personally, going abroad, the fears were, well, one big, am I safe? Basically, I don't know this fucking town. Is it safe? I don't want to live in some bit that turns out to be rammed full of like chavs attacking people and shit and gangsters and fuck knows what. So find a decent part of town where it's kind of nice and the streets seem fairly safe. So you're not going to get attacked, and also security, that you're not going to get robbed. I mean, most countries, I mean, Kiev is pretty secure like that, big metal doors and all of this kind of thing. It's pretty secure like that, and the people are kind of uprighted, but I didn't know that when I arrived. So safety is one thing, and then the other thing is, meeting people and finding people and just being open in situations where maybe it doesn't go your way or whatever, and being able to, maybe you try and vibe with a lot of people, they don't vibe with you, and this is a kind of fear, and then I isolate myself. But even if that happens, I just have to get up and keep moving towards people. It's keep taking risks and challenges. So I think where people, the big thing for people is dissociation. It's living in this mind world of ideas, rather than, hey, I'm out in the world, I'm going to take a fucking risk, and when we're not perhaps aware of that, or not fully aware of our dissociation level, then we keep on making excuses. We keep blaming the outside. There's always something wrong with the outside somewhere. It's not us, but it's clear to me that if you want to, with, even someone like me, 60 years old, I can go out into the world and travel and do stuff. I can go out and live abroad if I want to. And my brain is old. I tried to learn Russian. I couldn't, I'd really had to work at it, and I still can't. Spanish is easier because I spoke that a bit when I was younger, a little bit. I spent a summer in Barcelona in my early 20s, and I'd learned a bit then. So it's kind of easier for me to kind of practice a bit more and do basic Spanish. But, it's like that, you don't have to be in a negative environment. Of course, you also need to make money, you need to have enough money so that you're not a drain. Some countries nowadays have digital nomad visas because they want people to come, not to take the local people's jobs, but to have money and bring money into the country, whether they're spending rent or, or they're going out eating and stuff like that, So, it can, what I'm saying is it can all be done. 2021, you can certainly go out and do this, providing you've got some cash coming in, that's that you need.
Yeah. No,
Or have a surplus of cash note away somewhere,
Yeah, I mean that's obviously. I mean, it's not an excuse I would use, but I mean, it kind of is. If you've got a limited amount of money, it's eventually going to run out, and maybe So how did you find that? Because you said about working, and this is the first time you did working and traveling. So how did you find it different? I mean, what I found is when I go traveling now, or I go to a new city for a few days, I tend to not necessarily get bored, but I'm kind of like, all right, I want to get stuck into something. I want to work on this and that. I mean, did you find? I mean, the fact that you found, I won't say the purpose or your passion, obviously bioenergetics and all this sort of work. Do you find it a lot easier as well? So how's it different, and is it great that you just know what you enjoy doing, and it's not like you're just in some office somewhere?
Well, I mean, maybe I'm lucky or maybe I just worked at it, but yeah, I do know what I enjoy doing, which is working as a therapist, basically, a workshop leader. And so I enjoy doing that. I also enjoy having a job. I think I would find it harder, being in foreign countries if I didn't have something to do, meaningful with some of my time. I tend to work these days, maybe Monday to Friday, kind of 9 till 3 or something like that, and those are my hours, and then I'm just kind of out doing stuff. But I'm happy that I've got some kind of a job, that kind of gives me some focus and direction. I'm writing another book this time on Reiki and character structure. I've got projects and I've got bits and bobs that are going on. So that kind of keeps me occupied in a way, but it also gives me a sense of meaning. That work side gives me a sense of meaning, and also it's a kind of counterpoint to the times when I'm going out and having a laugh or meeting people and having fun. I've got this kind of, it's a bit like a kind of 9 to 5, Monday to Friday lifestyle, but it works for me. I have to induce it I have to kind of put it on myself rather than have a company where I'm kind of clocking in or checking in at certain times, and I've got a boss. So I have to be a bit my own boss with it. But I haven't found it difficult. I mean, I was kind of wondering, like, technically, do I need other stuff? Because I make video content, I have to cart around a bit of video equipment, like a bit of lighting and shit, which is a drag. And I'm just working off a quite small MacBook, one of these little kind of 11-inch MacBooks. But that's all fine. It's all been fine. I haven't really had any hassles. I had to buy one light in Kiev. That was about all I had to, maybe 1 or 2 cables or something like that here and there. Sometimes ordering stuff is difficult if you're in Airbnb. The addresses can be really weird. Maybe postage from the UK has kind of collapsed after Brexit. It hasn't really got itself together, so it's totally unreliable sending things out of the country. So there can be little problems like that, but I haven't found any big problems at all in 4 months so far, really.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, one thing that was interesting you said to me before the call about, that the UK, is expensive, especially in London, and as you live in Brighton and a lot of these places around London. So it's like the price you have to make, is a lot higher. And I think that's why a lot of people probably end up stuck in London, in the rat race, you could say. But what I heard when I went to Nepal about, excuse me, I went to Nepal about 5 years ago now, and it's just so cheap there. You're paying like £2.50 for your dinner in the evening, in a restaurant, and then it's like £5 a night in a place, right? And the bar was lowered so much more, where it's like I just all of a sudden felt this freedom, and it's like, hold on, I could stay here for a couple of years without worrying. So it's that makes a difference as well, would you say? Because I know I went to Kiev, and the coffees were paying like 40-50p a coffee. I remember I don't know how much it is now. But does that makes a big impact as well? Like, because I'm assuming if you're in Brighton, Dev, that gap's probably a bit higher. Or did you spend that similar amount of money doing fun stuff in Kiev, or did you sort of tighten up the
I mean, it's a bit cheaper, but it's not like super cheaper. I mean, prices are coming up in a lot of capital cities anyway. Kiev, the rents are going up. At least everyone goes on about the rents going up. You probably, in a nice cafe, you pay maybe 55, 60 hryvnias for a cappuccino, which is about £1.70, something like that. You know, it's not on the street. You might pay £1 in Kiev, but
Well, that
that's a
must
little
be a lot,
street
I think.
kiosk, you know, standing outside. You know, prices come up. You know, in capital cities across the world, I think prices come up. The thing you can do is like there's stuff like Nomad List, which compares like remote working and living in like 100 different cities worldwide, and monitors them with all sorts of different factors around the price of a cup of tea, or the Wi-Fi speeds, or safety on the street, or whether you're safe being a gay person there or whatever. It does like 100 different factors, and that's kind of interesting. You can go on their site, and just look at all these different cities that they've assessed, and which ones are cool to live in and which ones are going to be a bit of a drag, and this kind of thing. There's a couple of websites that do that. One is called Nomad List, and the other one, I can't remember its name, but it hasn't got Nomad in it. It's a bit of it's a different kind of name.
Yeah,
but they're, just for remote workers. But, I pay about, I'm still paying, I guess in Brighton, I was paying 900, which was splitting with my girlfriend, pounds a month for rent in somewhere, one bedroom flat, fairly central. And then there's bills on top of that, which is like another 200-300 quid easy. So it's about 1,200 a month, which is about 1,400 euros. And I wasn't paying all of that because my girlfriend was paying some of it. And now I'm probably not paying a lot less, given that I'm on my own. Now like in Mexico City, I'm paying something like in Kiev at the end, I was paying about £500-600 a month, all in with bills and all of that kind of stuff. And it'll be about the same in Mexico City. I'm in an Airbnb right now, but I'll probably charge around and look for some kind of local landlord I can stay with for a couple of months or something like that, get a bit of a cheaper price. But it's not like mega cheap, it's not like I remember places.
Yeah, I mean there are places that are cheap though. That I mean, but like you said, I think you said capital cities. I think
capital cities, yeah, but they're more expensive, and of course then there's more going on and stuff like that. I mean, certainly you can go somewhere like Ecuador and live very, very fucking cheaply. I think I've heard some people doing that because they've got a new digital nomad visa. If you can demonstrate you're earning $300 a month, you can just live there in perpetuity, pretty much.
Yeah, sometimes you take that break there.
Massive dictatorship going on, probably, but like that's South America for you anyway. But it's like I don't know. There's just a lot of infrastructure nowadays with the internet. There's a lot of infrastructure. Whether it's Airbnb, whether it's blockchain stuff or whatever. There's a lot that can support you to be in different countries if you want to.
Yeah, no, yeah, great. I mean, on that topic, I remember at one point we did talk about. I mean, I was obviously curious, how is it with the COVID situation? I guess it makes you see how the countries are reacting differently to it. I remember people telling me they learn a lot as well from seeing people's reaction. So I would say that Kiev, and people probably know that places like the Ukraine and definitely Mexico are probably, a lot less loose with the restrictions. I mean, what are the sort of differences you notice in Kiev and what you've noticed so far in Mexico in comparison to, say, London, Brighton, the UK?
Well, I mean, a big thing is like, if you're just living in the West and you're just consuming Western media, which is most people in the West, the impression is that you're connected to the rest of the world. But in my experience, that is not really true. You're being fed with images, not necessarily in some kind of malevolent way, but you're just being fed with images of how the rest of the world is. Likewise, if you're living in Eastern Europe or in Russia, you're being fed with images, or China, you're being fed with images, or South America, of how the rest of the world is, but they're not necessarily accurate. So that's one thing. So you kind of have to either speak another language and connect into the media of another country to find out what people are actually thinking about the West or whatever. Like, for example, a big news story at the moment in the UK press and all across the West is the Ukraine and Putin amassing troops on the Ukrainian border. But in the Ukraine, people aren't very worried about this. You'd expect people to be in a state of fucking panic or something like that. No, they're not actually that bothered, really. It's like, yeah, they don't want Putin to invade, but, the media stories in certain countries or areas get inflated hugely. When it comes to COVID, I mean, in Ukraine, for a start, no one trusts the government. government. No one trusts a fucking word the government says. They just literally don't. So no one will take the vaccine pretty much. And that hasn't done them all that much good, because when a wave of COVID comes, it comes up and goes down, and it will kill a lot more people than it will in the West. Because, it's not that I'm wildly pro-vaccine, but it's clear from scientific evidence that the vaccine will reduce the chances of you dying or getting serious hospitalization. So when the big wave does come in somewhere like the Ukraine or Russia, where also people are pretty former communist countries they don't trust authority, because they had so many bad experiences of authority during the communist times. Even though that ended in like 1990, it's still there in people's psyche, even in people who are only in their teens or 20s. They don't trust the structure very much. So what happens when the COVID wave comes is a lot more people get sick, and a lot more people end up in hospital. A lot more people end up in hospital, and a lot more people end up dead, basically. And that's just how it goes. And they do tend to take a bit of precautions. The masks are very popular in Ukraine. They'll always wear masks in the shops and on the underground. I was surprised when I came back to the UK in late November, and like no one is wearing a mask on the underground and London Underground, and no one was wearing a mask in the train. I was a bit surprised. I'm not that bothered, but it was like, I was a bit surprised. It was much more that here in Mexico, people wear masks. I mean, they wear them outside. Yeah. Local people who tend to be darker skinned and a bit more squat, they're a bit close to the kind of local kind of working class people of you might consider in like London.
It's not the pressure.
You what?
I was going to say, is it not the pressure? Because basically in London, I was here, and yeah, no one was wearing them on the tube. Then they made them mandatory again the other week, and now everyone's wearing them again. So it's not that they want to; it's that because they have to.
I think people here want to. I mean, I think the thing is,
you're saying that's the difference.
Yeah, people here want to. I mean, they're concerned about it. I mean, like, if you're just some poor guy living in the outskirts of Kiev or the outskirts of Mexico City, you don't want to fucking die, basically. It's simple as that. You don't want to die. Probably your diet isn't that great. And you think, well, if I wear a mask, it'll reduce the chances of me catching COVID, which is probably true, certainly in an indoor area. That seems to be the case. Outdoors, it's probably relatively untrue, I would say. But I mean, certainly in Kiev, you don't see many outdoors mask wearers, but in Mexico, in places I've been so far, they wear the masks outdoors. Quite a lot of people wear them outdoors, which is quite something in this heat as well. Though of course they're used to it, but like, yeah, but here again. In Ukraine, the government will take action, but no one takes any notice of the action, pretty much. Like, it'll have a red zone and shutting things down. But, the first couple of days, people are really into it. And there's someone on the door checking that you've got vaccine passport. And about a week later, they just kind of, yeah, and you go, or they see a British one. It's not written in Cyrillic script and they just let you in. They don't care. The keenness goes, people get bored of it. Here, there doesn't seem to be any vaccine passport stuff, and the government doesn't seem bothered. You don't have to be vaccinated to enter Mexico. You don't have to do any tests to enter Mexico. You're supposed to fill in this Vuelo Seguro online form, which is completely shagged, basically, and the English translated version just makes no real sense. But you're supposed to fill that in, and sometimes they might check it. They checked it once.
Why is that, Deb? Like, why is that in Mexico they're not even bothered, and then if you go to somewhere like Spain or these places I've been told where they either won't let you in or it's really strict, and then maybe shoving the tests up your nose or whatever. Why in Mexico? Is it just that they can't be asked, and is it similar to Kiev that they?
I mean, you got to. I mean, the EU is super keen on regulations, basically. I mean, and they want digital identities to come in. They're not even hiding it. I mean, Tony Blair, who runs I quite like actually, Tony Blair Institute for Global Change, has made absolute statements in the summer saying, we really see. Vaccine passports as a route to getting digital identity. And digital identity, personally, I agree with. I'm fine with digital identity. In fact, I'd be the first person in the queue to get a digital identity. I'm not an old hippie sort of Luddite type, But, nevertheless, it would be nice to even bring it in a bit more directly, as opposed to, okay, let's have vaccine passports and then we'll have digital identity. Because in the EU now, it is a bit draconian. Basically, in Greece, you can't even sit outside a cafe unless you've got a fucking vaccine passport, which makes no scientific sense whatsoever, none, So the EU has got an alternative agenda as well, and Blair tried to bring the agenda into the UK, but the Tories are in control, and the Tories are anti these kind of rules, So if the Labour Party were in, Britain would probably have a lot more vaccine passports, without bringing any political blah blah into it. That tends to be how it goes. The more left wing a government is, the more likely it's to introduce social control. That's a general principle, because the left is much more about the needs of the many against the needs of the individual, and right-wing parties tend to be more towards the needs of the individual opposed to the needs of the many. And with something like a pandemic, of course, there's clear, it's clear that the needs of the many are important, and if no one's taking prophylactic measures or whatever, then the pandemic could get worse, and the many get in trouble. That's just pretty obvious. What those measures are can be discussed. So in the EU, you've got an assortment of factors piling up. The thing with democracies is that, they're not really, they're kind of run by the people, but not really. It's like there's lobbying commissions in the background and social media campaigns. Everything's moving public opinion in certain directions all the time. There's a lot of manipulation. You don't necessarily get that outside of the West, because you've just got simple autocracies. Someone at the top of the government says, we're going to do this. Or in the Ukraine, the government doesn't even run anything anyway. There's 5 oligarchs who run the whole country, basically. Everyone knows that, and it's like, okay, we're going to do this, and that's what we're going to do. So you don't have even the pretense of democracy outside of the West, which is about 87% of the world. The population of the world is not living in Western democracies, it's living in these simple autocracies. So then when you come to Mexico, and I don't really know the exact reasoning behind the Mexicans, maybe I'll find out while I'm here, but they don't seem, the government doesn't seem bothered, basically. Possibly it's a bit more right-wing. I don't even know much about the government here, and so it's not interested. It's going to be a simple autocratic structure where basically, the relatives of the people who run things get a lot of money out of it, and maybe they want the tourism to continue. There's a lot of, vaccine skeptical or vaccine hesitant people come to Mexico because there's no restrictions on them, and it's nice and warm in winter, that kind of thing, So I don't know the real reason why Mexico isn't following any specific rules, but what you've got to understand is that it's only really in the West that you have this kind of veneer of democracy. Well, there is some level of democracy there. In the rest of the world, they're just living in simple autocracies. Pretty much anywhere you go to Southeast Asia, a few guys are running the country. You go to Myanmar, they're running the country. You go to India, the powerful businessmen at the top are running the country. They even got, institutionalized class structure. You come to South America or Central America, there's very simple autocratic power structures, top-down hierarchies. And so the people at the top decide what's going on. And there might be a little bit of influencing from the West or somewhere else, but probably not that much. That's how I see it.
Yeah, Dev, thanks for sharing all of that, and your opinions on things, and yeah, and it obviously got me thinking. I think on this topic alone, we could end up going completely off the script and talk about lots of stuff that's going on in the world at the moment. But it is interesting, like you're saying, to see. You can't help but get into political sort of realizations or discussions, because you go to countries and you see how things are different, but ultimately the same. This like stuff to do with the government, maybe either they don't care or people don't trust them, and it's also seeing how the UK is. You said sometimes I think, no one trusts the government here, but like they do, because they still are following what they say. But it sounds like Ukraine is very much just giving them the finger, which I think is kind of cool.
Well, it's also just historical. If you were brought up in a country, your parents were brought up in a country where authority visibly lied to you for a long period of time, which is exactly what happened in the communist years. I mean, like bloody Chernobyl is exploding and the government's saying it's all okay, don't worry. It's like you're not going to trust authority. You're just not. And that will continue for decades afterwards. It's
so
not
why do you think the UK
they're not protesting. They don't give the finger to the government. They don't give the finger to the government. They just don't comply. They don't do it in any kind of rebellious way. They just find a way to not comply.
So why do you think the UK has some people who trust, and then they get angry all the time with it's like this kind of ongoing parents, like living with your parents, and throwing a tantrum all the time, or that's what it feels like in the UK. Because if you said in the Ukraine, it's like everyone ignores them, and in the UK, there's quite high compliance, but there's also is that to do with the history of the country and these sort of things?
I think it's more just, I guess it's more just about being a Western democracy. There's a lot of, the government knows, okay, we've got a democracy. If people want to protest, they're allowed to protest. If they want to have a big freak out, they can. But at the same time, of course, you've got huge kind of media campaigns. You've got manipulation stuff going on in the media. You've got all of this stuff. You don't really get that so much in the other countries I've been to, because there's no need, because, it wouldn't make much difference. So it's like you've got this whole media show going on in the West, pushing people in different directions. The media is very, very powerful in Western countries, traditional media, and as we're seeing, social media now, So, you're allowed to do more protesting and stuff like that, but at the same time, you're also immersed in a lot more propaganda. I don't think you get so much propaganda here. Well, I've only been in Mexico and Kiev, but I don't think you get so much propaganda around it.
Mm-hmm.
You have a few
it costs money as well.
Your mosques, but I mean,
it costs money as well, doesn't it? That's what I found in Nepal. It didn't really have much stuff because they couldn't afford it. I mean, what I noticed in Nepal was people were a bit like, the corruption and stuff, because they were just like, Kathmandu had an earthquake, and then their country was given all this money years ago, and the government never paid to do it up, or they never finished.
It's trickle down. It's trickle down. They'll take a chunk of it and then they'll give a bit over to what they're supposed to do. It's how it works. And also, of course, I mean, another factor is that the average Westerner does not have the much major survival threats that they need to face on a regular basis. When COVID comes along, it's massive in the West, because we don't have other survival threats now. In Ukraine, you've got the threat of invasion, you've got the threat of poverty, you've got all sorts of dramas going on and stuff like that. COVID is not whacking right up into the top of your nervous system in terms of threats. You've got other things going on. Plus, you've learned a basic resilience because of all that drama. You're not expecting to live to be 95. Same in South America or Central America. Your expectation as an individual is not that you're going to, your family is much more important. There's always different factors that are coming in. So COVID may not register so far up in terms of what's making you panic. Whereas in the West, it's terrifying the crap out of people because they haven't had any significant survival threats, since World War II, basically, and the threat of the atomic bomb or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, this stuff is so fascinating. I guess linking it back to traveling now, I think overall it's good to know about all this stuff, and maybe people are suited to different countries, and where they're feeling the stress of whether it's the media and the way people are reacting. You get on the tube or whatever, and maybe people are talking about it, they're stressing out, they want you to stay away from them, whereas maybe if you're in somewhere like Mexico, it could be different. So I think it's good to get out there and still see the world. Particularly at the moment, you're like sort of pointing out that you're seeing definitely the differences in how the world is handling this particular sort of crisis. But what would you say with once the Kiev thing was over, what made you then want to go to Mexico and not sort of just stay in Brighton? Obviously, apart from the hot weather in Mexico. Would you not just sort of take away from Kiev and stay in the UK for a bit, or did you just want to get out again?
Well, a friend of mine was in Mexico City for 6 months of 2021 early on, and he was just messaging me saying how great it was. And I thought, I've never been to Central America, and I kind of had the idea, maybe I'll get into Russia or Georgia. I was also interested in kind of Central Asia. But then I thought, well, what would be more of a challenge? What would be more of a challenge? And I thought, well, it'd be more of a challenge to go to Central America because I've never been there, So that was one thing, and then and then the therapy I teach is quite grounded. There's quite a lot of people who are interested in bio in Latin cultures, which is mostly, apart from Southern Europe, is mostly Central and South America. So I thought, I've never even been to these countries where a lot of this therapy actually comes from, or is certainly very popular in those areas, where there's more natural respect for it. for bioenergetics and for the Reichian work. So that was another factor really. And then, yeah, the weather was a first. So you got the risk for me, taking a bit more risk, coming out of my comfort zone, and doing something new.
Mm.
And I got confidence from being in Kiev for a few months and surviving and doing okay. I thought, well, I can live like this, I could go somewhere else as well and try that, So that and the background with therapy and the weather and stuff, kind of I would have felt like, God, I'm really playing safe if I'd stayed in Brighton, paying a shit ton of money to live in a flat somewhere and stuff. It would have been okay right through the winter, but I mean, I would have felt a bit of a, I don't know, I would have felt a bit of a saddo, I think, having kind of set myself the challenge and then kind of back down from it, for no good reason, really.
Yeah, definitely, Dev. Do you think it's good to, because I mean, I sometimes feel like, because I feel like sometimes I get a bit bored of being in one place that, I feel like in my life I need a bit more variety. I tend to in London at least every few months or every 6 months or year move to a different area, different location, learn a bit more about, because, and then sometimes I meet people who are like, oh, I've lived in the same area for like 20 years of my life. And it's, for me, I don't know if I can just do that. So do you think that's maybe just the kind of person you are and sense of adventure? I mean, do you feel like that? I mean, with you're saying that you're in different Airbnbs, I think it would be great because there's the great perks of just Airbnb and, you're staying in places that are all furnished. Whereas I know people who maybe they move house a few times and they've bought everything, they're carrying it around. And, I find it a bit more free to sort of live like that, going Airbnb. Do you sort of agree with that as well? And do you think it's a certain type of person that just wants that adventure and that's what makes them happy?
Yeah, I think you're right in that in many ways. And challenge is a big thing for me as well. Like if I'll challenge myself if I'm in a bit of a crisis, and if I'm not, I kind of get in a bit of a track, and I just kind of chug along a bit. And then when me and my girlfriend were discussing in the summer and saying, hey, we actually want to do different stuff, that's a challenge for me. My brain registers that as a challenge, and then it's like, okay, take the challenge and step up. And it's made a difference in my inner state, having to face myself more, having to face loneliness, having to face and make it more aloneness and go out and get my needs met. That has been a good developmental challenge for me, and it's given me certain confidence as well. So that for me is a big part of it, recognizing the value of challenge and the fact that I can get pretty stuck at times. And we all get in a rut. We all get in a fucking rut, and it's like, are you happy with the rut, or are you sufficiently unhappy that you will get out of the rut? Because the rut also offers comfort, and you kind of know the reference points, about your boss or whatever, and your workmates, your relationship, and all of this stuff. But then there's always the kind of part of the mind that says, but what if you just jumped out of this and did something new, and then that's a risk, a challenge, and that's always exciting as well as a bit scary. It's primal stuff. It's very basic stuff, taking a risk.
Did you find, I was chatting to one of my friends and he said it was great because he's gone to Morocco, and he said it just made him like, because he's left sort of all of his friends in London, he's been there for a few months, and he's realized more about those relationship dynamics, what he wants, what he doesn't want. And sometimes it's difficult when you're in it to really reflect. And then also another question was, when you're then in Mexico or Kiev and you're making new relationships, did you catch yourself aware of recreating similar dynamics? I know you've not got a boss at a job, for example, but I know if I went traveling, you're more likely to maybe run into some authority figure or someone who's, or have someone like that in your social circle who may trigger the same things. Were you sort of aware of stuff like that?
I didn't get any I don't think I had any massive authority triggers, and
or just like relationship dynamics, maybe, like
I mean,
similar ones that you would have in say London, or did you find
it's a bit different? It's curious. I developed quite a lot of friends in Kiev. Several friends who are quite a lot younger, like half my age. Just to hang out. We go for walks together and stuff like that. But I didn't find myself getting into many major authority kind of dynamics with people. That wasn't getting triggered so much for me. I also worked a lot on that side and have had a lot of authority trips in the past. I think a challenge for me, I mean, I was kind of still entangled with my ex for a lot of the time in Kiev. And so I wasn't really going out and dating and meeting new women, and that'll be a challenge for me here now to go out and meet women. And, that'll be more of a challenge. I don't know if I'll get in a lot of authority stuff. I have that side, but a lot of the charge inside has gone from that. It's come out in the therapy groups or whatever. I don't get super triggered by the cops and stuff like that, or vast levels of government corruption. I more look, hey, how am I in that?
Yeah.
So that's not, I don't know. I mean, maybe who knows what will get triggered, I don't know. But I think the challenge for me will be more around like women and dating.
Mm. And it allows you, now you're out there, to see your life that you were living in Brighton, of things that you liked and maybe things you didn't like. Is that, like I told you, my friend went to Morocco and he was like, hold on, 2 or 3 of these friends I was around, I don't want to hang out with them when I get back, did that. Because when I went to Nepal as well, I noticed I had this just this freedom, because then all of a sudden you don't get people texting you all the time because you're on the other side of the world, and people think, maybe even if I'm trying to text you, Dev, I'm kind of thinking, oh, Dev's probably too busy. And then maybe you're not. Maybe you just sat in some cafe in Mexico, just like not doing much.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I had so many friendships that I was trying to get out of in some way or something like that. Like the friendships I had in Brighton, I think there's a tendency to get a bit too cozy in them. So not making new friendships and just hanging out with my mate here and friend there or an ex there or whatever. It's a bit cozy and not very challenging, and we kind of know each other very well, and that's okay. But it's also exciting to go somewhere else. But I haven't noticed bits that really bugged me so much. I think I probably just got out of those anyway a bit. I mean, certainly, I don't know. Yeah, it felt safer because I just knew Brighton very much, but I don't have a lot of. When I think back to the UK now, it just seems a bit kind of grey and expensive. But I don't have a massive downer on it at the moment. It's just pricey for shit.
Yeah.
It's expensive. Basic stuff is bloody expensive. Sometimes.
This is what traveling's doing. Then it's changing your perspective of maybe what you wouldn't have been aware of if you were just living in the UK. So yeah, I guess Dev, maybe we could sum this all, finalize all of this, and maybe just why do you recommend people to go traveling, or people who are like, oh, I would love to go away, but I'm going to leave it for another year, or this or that, staying in that comfort zone.
Yeah, I mean, it's not so much that I recommend people to do this because I'm a therapist. It's more like, I encourage them to look. If you have a plan to do something and you're habitually not doing it, that is down to you. It's not down to any. You can make 400 excuses about why you're not doing it, but it's finally down to you. And we are all 7.8 billion of us on this planet in the same thing. We're in the same thing, and if you're not stepping up and taking risks, you're probably beating yourself up internally, and you have to be willing to say, how long am I going to put up with that? So it's not so much that I recommend things for people. It's like it's down to the individual. It's down to the individual. And I think something I did learn and notice was I was building up stories of resentment to a degree, being stuck in the UK. There were underlying resentments there, not massive, but they were there. And then coming out of there, recognizing, okay, I'm getting a bit resentful about this place, I think is useful. And then saying, hey, is there anything practical I can do to change it? Or should I just move somewhere different? Do I actually want to move somewhere different? That's useful to do. And then you have to learn what you need to do it largely yourself. It's not other people that are going to do it for you.
Yeah, definitely. And as well, just being in a different environment, seeing different things, meeting different people, you become more present, right? Because it's just something different. You're like, whoa, what is this? I didn't even know this place existed in the world. I feel like
you get more stimulation. You get stimulation. It's like you may get triggered to fuck basically by a certain thing.
You don't know what's going on,
which maybe you thought you were okay with before. It's a challenge.
Great stuff, Dev. All right. Well, I think I'll leave the interview there. So thanks for joining us.
Hey, it's nice to see you again, Chris. I'm very happy to chat.